The jewelry sparkled under the chandeliers, casting gold and ruby light across Samantha's throat as she posed in front of the guests. The Morrison family jewels, once worn by my mother-in-law on her wedding day, were now wrapped around the neck of the woman who had just humiliated me in front of 30 people. "Don't worry, Clara," Samantha whispered with a smirk. "The lawyer said you got something too. A charming little cabin, wasn't it?" The guests chuckled. Some looked away. My son, Michael, didn't even meet my eyes. I stood there, a 67-year-old widow in a black dress that suddenly felt too tight around my chest. My hands trembled as I clutched my purse. 38 years of marriage to Henry Morrison, and this was what remained of my place in his family. A cabin. A forgotten shack in the desert outskirts of Santa Fe. I excused myself, walking with as much dignity as I could muster through the crowd. The townhouse that had been my home for decades felt foreign now, with Samantha's modern art replacing Henry's paintings, and strangers drinking wine in corners where I once read books to Michael as a child. The bathroom door closed behind me with a soft click. I stared at my reflection, gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, lines around my eyes that Henry used to call wisdom markers. I was a retired English teacher, not some socialite draped in jewels. But still, after a lifetime together, after nursing him through illness, after building this family, I deserved more than pity glances and whispers. "Mom?" Michael's voice came through the door. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath and opened it. My son stood there, tall like his father, but with a weakness in his eyes I'd never seen in Henry's. "I'm fine," I said. "I think I'll head out now." "Already?" But Samantha planned this whole evening to celebrate Dad's memory. Did she? I looked past him to where my daughter-in-law was showing off the ruby necklace to her friends. Or to celebrate her inheritance? Michael sighed. "Mom, Dad had his reasons. The cabin might be rustic, but it's still a property. And Samantha and I did take care of him those last months while I was teaching, working to keep our health insurance, driving 2 hours every night to be with him at the hospital." My voice remained quiet, but I saw him flinch. "Don't rewrite our history, Michael." He looked down. "Let me at least drive you home." "No need. I'm not going home." I straightened my shoulders. "I'm going to see my inheritance." I walked past him, through the crowd of strangers and distant relatives who suddenly found their drinks fascinating as I passed. At the door, I turned for one last look at the place I'd called home. Samantha caught my eye and raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. That night, I drove alone to the outskirts of Santa Fe. The paved road eventually turned to dirt. Cactus and dust lined the narrow path. Coyotes howled in the distance. My headlights caught the small wooden sign, 3710 Dry Creek Road. The key from the lawyer's envelope felt heavy in my hand. The cabin looked worse than I'd imagined. Weathered wood, a partially collapsed porch, windows, with broken panes. The door creaked open, revealing darkness and the smell of abandonment. I switched on my flashlight and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the beam, a table with 3 legs, a faded armchair, a kitchenette with rusted fixtures. "Oh, Henry," I whispered. "Why?" My foot caught on a loose floorboard and I stumbled forward. The flashlight beam swung wildly, illuminating something unusual in the wall, a seam where there shouldn't be one. I moved closer, running my fingers along the edge. It was a hidden panel. With trembling hands, I pried it open, revealing a small drawer built into the wall. Inside was a metal box, a sealed envelope with my name in Henry's handwriting, and a key I didn't recognize. I sat on the floor, dust swirling around me, and opened the envelope. "My dearest Clara," Henry's letter began. "If you're reading this, then everything has gone according to plan. I know you must be confused and hurt right now, but trust me, my love, this cabin isn't what it seems, and neither was our son's marriage." I read until tears blurred my vision. Then I opened the metal box. Inside wasn't junk. It was my husband's real inheritance. Stacks of documents. Deed, a bank statement, photos of properties I'd never seen. And suddenly, I understood. I hadn't been cut out of the family. I had been protected. The wind howled outside the cabin as I spread Henry's documents across the dusty floor. My hands shook as I read each page by flashlight, the reality of my situation slowly transforming before my eyes. "Clara," Henry's letter continued, "I watched Samantha's influence grow over the years, and I saw what she was doing to Michael. Our son changed. You noticed it too, though you were too kind to say it aloud. When I got sick, I realized I needed to protect you and our real legacy. I remembered those final months. Henry whispering with lawyers while I thought he was making peace with his mortality. The secret calls. The documents he'd hide. When I entered the room, I'd assumed it was his way of sparing me from difficult decisions. I'd been wrong. The bank statement showed an account in my name with over $450,000. The deed was for a restored adobe ranch house on the other side of Santa Fe, a beautiful property worth far more than the townhouse Michael and Samantha now occupied. But most valuable of all was a portfolio of Henry's, never exhibited paintings, his private collection, along with a letter from the Santa Fe Gallery of Modern Art expressing interest in showing them. The appraisal value made me gasp, over $2 million. I gave them what they wanted, Henry wrote. The jewels, the townhouse, the public paintings, the things Samantha coveted. But I've given you what you need. Security, independence, and the true heart of my work. The cabin is just the key to unlock it all. They'll never look here. I wiped tears from my cheeks, remembering the day Henry had purchased this property 15 years ago. Just a weekend getaway, he'd said. Nothing special. We'd visited only twice before he declared it too rustic for regular use. I'd forgotten about it entirely. What a perfect hiding place. The final document was a trust agreement, carefully structured to protect me from any legal challenges. Henry had worked with a different law firm, not Philip Green, who'd handled the public will reading. This trust predated his illness by years. He'd been planning this for a long time. As dawn broke, pale light filtered through the broken windows. I hadn't slept, but I felt more awake than I had in months. I walked outside and looked at the cabin with new eyes. Behind it, the mountains rose against the morning sky, a view worth millions to the right buyer. The property itself was larger than I'd realized in the darkness, stretching for several acres. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "Mom, where are you? We were worried." I almost laughed. Now they were worried. After the party? After the will reading? After changing the locks on my home without warning? Instead of answering, I called the number on one of Henry's documents. A woman named Elaine Torres answered. Henry's secret lawyer. "Mrs. Morrison," she said warmly when I introduced myself. "I've been waiting for your call. Are you at the cabin?" "Yes," I said. "I found everything." "Excellent." Henry was very specific about the timing. He wanted you to have a chance to process everything before we met. "Can you come to my office today?" 3 hours later, showered and changed at a nearby hotel, I sat in a sleek downtown office as Elaine explained the full extent of Henry's plan. "Your husband was a remarkable man," she said, sliding folders across her desk. "He came to me 5 years ago, concerned about Samantha's influence over your son. He'd noticed money missing, heard conversations that troubled him. He wanted to ensure you were protected. Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, the question that had kept me awake all night. "He said you would have insisted on confronting them, that you always believed in facing problems head-on." She smiled. "He admired that about you, but in this case he felt a more strategic approach was needed. The trust was ironclad. The townhouse and jewels went to Michael and Samantha as a distraction, the public face of Henry's legacy. But the real wealth, the properties, the secret art collection, the investments, all came to me through channels they couldn't touch. "There's one more thing," Elaine said, handing me a small key. "A safety deposit box at First National. Henry was very specific about you opening it alone." That afternoon, I sat in a private room at the bank, staring at the contents of the box. Inside was a small velvet pouch and another letter. "My dearest Clara," it began, "if you're reading this, then you've discovered everything else. Now comes the hardest part, deciding what to do next. Our son made his choice when he married Samantha. Now you must make yours." Inside the pouch was my mother-in-law's wedding ring, the one I'd always assumed had been buried with her. More valuable than the necklace Samantha now wore, it had been hidden away for this moment. "Remember what Margaret told us," Henry's letter continued. "True wealth isn't what people see. It's what they would never expect you to carry." I slipped the ring onto my finger, where it fit perfectly. Outside the bank, the Santa Fe sun bathed everything in golden light. For the first time since Henry's death, I felt something like peace. My phone buzzed again. Michael calling now, his third attempt today. This time, I answered. "Mom, where are you? Why didn't you come home last night?" "Home. as if I still had one with them. "I'm at my home, Michael," I said calmly. "My new home." "What are you talking about? The cabin?" "Mom, be serious." "I'm very serious," I interrupted. "And we need to talk. Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow at Elaine Torres's office. I believe it's time you learned about your father's real will." I hung up before he could respond, feeling stronger than I had in months. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, perhaps even more pain. But tonight, I would sleep in the adobe ranch house that Henry had secretly purchased for me, the true legacy he'd left behind. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway of my new home, casting long shadows across the terracotta tiles and native plants. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled of sage and pine. Large windows framed the mountains. On the walls hung 3 of Henry's most beautiful paintings, landscapes of the Southwest that captured the soul of this place we'd both loved. "Well played, my love," I whispered to the empty room. "Well played." The morning sun illuminated Elaine Torres's office as I sat waiting, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I'd dressed carefully, a tailored navy dress I'd found in the adobe ranch house closet, with a note from Henry. For when you're ready to face them. The outfit was new, expensive, and nothing like what I typically wore. It was armor for the battle ahead. When Michael arrived, he wasn't alone. Samantha trailed behind him, the Morrison ruby necklace prominently displayed against her cream silk blouse. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, perhaps surprised by my composure or my changed appearance. "Mom," Michael began. "What's going on? Who is this woman? Why are we meeting at a lawyer's office?" I gestured to the chairs across from me. "Please, sit down. This is Elaine Torres, your father's other attorney." "Other attorney?" Samantha's voice was sharp. "Philip Green handled all of Henry's legal matters." "That's what Henry wanted you to believe," Elaine said, opening a leather portfolio. "Mr. Morrison retained my services 5 years ago for matters he wished to keep separate from his public estate." Michael's face paled. "I don't understand." "It's quite simple," I said, meeting my son's eyes. "Your father created 2 paths for his legacy. One for the world to see, the townhouse, the jewels, the public art collection, and one hidden from view." I placed the trust document on the table. "This is, the Morrison Family Trust. The real one." Samantha snatched the document before Michael could reach for it. Her eyes darted across the page, her expression hardening with each line. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "This can't be legal. Philip never mentioned—" "Philip Green wasn't informed," Elaine interrupted smoothly. "That was by design." I watched my daughter-in-law's face as understanding dawned. The jewelry at her throat suddenly seemed to tighten like a vice. "The cabin," Michael said slowly. "That's why Dad left you the cabin. It wasn't neglect. It was the key," I finished for him, "to everything else." Elaine methodically laid out the details, the properties, the investments, the art collection valued at over $2 million. With each revelation, Samantha's face grew more rigid, while Michael seemed to shrink in his chair. "The Morrison Gallery of Southwestern Art will open next month," I explained, "featuring Henry's private collection. The pieces you never saw, the ones he created in his studio when you were too busy to visit." I looked directly at Michael. "The work he did while you were managing his affairs? You can't do this," Samantha hissed. "We'll contest it. Your husband wasn't in his right mind when—" "The trust was established 5 years ago," Elaine cut in. "Well before Mr. Morrison's illness. All documents were properly witnessed and notarized. I have video recordings of Mr. Morrison explicitly stating his wishes and demonstrating sound mind." Michael finally found his voice. "Why would Dad do this? Why would he hide everything from us?" I pulled Henry's letter from my purse. "May I?" I asked Elaine, who nodded. "My son," I read, "if you're hearing this letter, then you've discovered the truth. I've watched you change over the years, becoming someone I no longer recognize. The money that disappeared from our accounts, the private calls, the lies about my treatments. I know what you and Samantha planned while Clara was. Teaching, exhausted, trying to keep our family afloat." Michael's face crumpled. "Mom, I could have confronted you." I continued reading. "But what would that accomplish? Instead, I chose to protect what matters most. Clara's future and the art that represents my true legacy. The public inheritance, the one you've been counting on, is yours. But the heart of what I built belongs to The woman who stood by me when nobody else would. Samantha stood abruptly. This is absurd. We cared for Henry in his final months. We were there when you were too busy with your little teaching job. You deserve exactly what you received, I said, my voice steady. The townhouse, the jewels, the public paintings. That was Henry's decision, and I won't challenge it. I stood to face her, but the rest is mine. And unlike you, I'm not interested in taking what doesn't belong to me. Michael looked broken, tears streaming down his face. Mom, please, we can work this out. As a family. Family? I touched my mother-in-law's ring, now on my finger. Is that what we were when you changed the locks on my home without warning? When you threw that party and let Samantha humiliate me? In front of everyone? When you stood silent as she wore your grandmother's jewels like trophies? Samantha grabbed her purse. This isn't over. Come on, Michael. But Michael didn't move. He stared at the table, at Henry's letter, at the trust documents outlining my new reality. Michael, Samantha snapped. Go ahead, he said quietly. I need to talk to my mother. Samantha's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare side with her now. Not after everything we've... She stopped herself, glancing at Elaine. After everything you've what, Samantha? I asked. Without another word, she stormed out, the door slamming behind her. In the silence that followed, Michael seemed to age before my eyes. He looked up at me, his father's eyes staring from a face I barely recognized. How much do you... know? He asked hoarsely. Enough, I said, sitting back down. Henry kept records of the withdrawals, of the conversations he overheard, of the consultation with that specialist in Arizona who wasn't a doctor at all. Michael covered his face with his hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Samantha said, we just needed control of his treatment. The experimental therapies were working. For other patients. If he'd just tried... He was dying, Michael, I said gently. No experimental treatment was going to change that. But you couldn't accept it, could you? You needed to believe there was a solution, a way to fix everything, just like you've always done. I never meant to hurt anyone, he whispered, especially not you. I thought of all the years I'd spent raising this man, teaching him right from wrong, watching his father pour love and wisdom into him. Where had we gone wrong? Or was this simply who he'd chosen to become? What happens now? He asked, looking lost. Now, I said, gathering my things. I build the life Henry prepared for me, and you decide what kind of man you want to be, with or without Samantha's influence. I stood to leave, but Michael caught my hand. Can you ever forgive me? His voice broke on the words. I looked down at my son, remembering the little boy who once brought me wildflowers and handmade cards, the teenager who defended a classmate being bullied, the young man who'd made us so proud at his college graduation. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Michael, I said softly. It's something you earn. Start by looking, honestly, at what you've become. The rest will follow. I walked out of Elaine's office into the bright Santa Fe sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. The confrontation I dreaded was behind me. Whatever came next, lawsuits, public scandal, family division, I was prepared to face it. Henry had given me more than financial security. He'd given me back my strength. The adobe ranch house became my sanctuary as spring blossomed across the New Mexico landscape. Each morning, I woke to mountains painted gold by sunrise, coyotes calling in the distance, and the scent of pinyon pine drifting through open windows. In this peaceful setting, I began the work of becoming Clara Morrison again. Not just Henry's widow or Michael's mother, but a woman with her own purpose. The first week, I explored every inch of my new home, discovering Henry's thoughtful touches everywhere. The kitchen with its traditional tile work and modern appliances, the studio filled with art supplies and easels facing the best views, the library stocked with first editions of my favorite books. He'd planned it all, creating a space that reflected our shared tastes and separate passions. In the master bedroom closet, I found clothes in my size, simple, elegant pieces I would have chosen myself. A note pinned to a silk scarf read, "For the gallery opening. You always looked beautiful in blue." I cried that night, missing him with an ache that felt physical. But these were different tears than before. Clean, healing tears that washed away months of confusion and pain. Elaine called regularly with updates. As predicted, Samantha had consulted lawyers about contesting the trust, but each firm gave her the same answer. The documents were ironclad. Meanwhile, preparations for the gallery opening continued, with interest growing among collectors and critics familiar with Henry's public work. "You should consider giving interviews," Elaine suggested one afternoon over tea on my patio. "The story is compelling. Henry's secret collection, preserved by the woman who inspired it." I shook my head. "No interviews? The art should speak for itself." "And what about Michael?" she asked carefully. "Have you heard from him?" I hadn't. Not since our confrontation in her office 3 weeks earlier. The silence hurt more than I wanted to admit. "He'll come around when he's ready," I said, hoping it was true. Or he won't. That's his choice now. The gallery preparations consumed my days. I worked closely with the curator, a woman named Lucia, who had known Henry in his early career. Together, we selected 37 paintings for the inaugural exhibition: landscapes, abstract compositions, and intimate portraits, including several of me that I'd never seen before. "He captured your essence," Lucia said, studying a portrait where I sat reading, sunlight streaming through a window. "The quiet strength, the intelligence. He saw you so clearly." I touched the canvas gently, sometimes more clearly than I saw myself. 2 days before the gallery opening, as I was reviewing the final catalog, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Michael standing there, looking thinner than when I'd last seen him, with dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice uncertain. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly, watching as he entered and took in the house, his first time seeing the place his father had created for me. "It's beautiful," he said finally. "It suits you." "Thank you." I led him to the living room, where large windows framed the mountain vista. "Would you like some tea?" He shook his head. "No, I won't stay long. I just needed to tell you something." He took a deep breath. "Samantha and I are separating." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart raced. "I see. Was that your decision or hers?" "Mine." He looked down at his hands. After our meeting with Elaine, I couldn't stop thinking about Dad's letter, about what he saw in me, what I'd become. I started looking back at decisions I'd made, conversations I'd had. It was like waking up from a long sleep. "And Samantha?" I asked. He struggled for words. "When I told her I wanted to make things right with you, she showed me who she really is. The things she said about you, about Dad. I couldn't unhear them." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything." I wanted to reach for him, to hold him as I had when he was small. But we weren't there yet. The bridge between us needed stronger foundations. "What will you do now?" I asked instead. "Move out of the townhouse for starters. Find an apartment. Figure out who I am without her influence." He hesitated. "I heard about the gallery opening. Would it be okay if I came?" I studied my son's face, the regret etched there, the hope, the uncertainty. "It's a public event," I said carefully. "Anyone can attend." He nodded, accepting the lukewarm response as better than rejection. "The jewels," he said suddenly. "She's been talking about selling them. I told her she needs your permission first." "She has my permission," I said. "They were never what mattered to me." Michael stood to leave, pausing by a small landscape hanging near the door, one of Henry's early works showing the view from our first apartment. "I remember when he painted this," Michael said softly. "I was maybe 7. You made hot chocolate and we all sat on the balcony while Dad worked. You told me stories about constellations." He touched the frame gently. "I forgot so many good things, Mom. I don't know how to remember them all again. One day at a time," I said. "That's how memory works. One good moment at a time." After he left, I sat for a long while, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The gallery opening was approaching, the public unveiling of Henry's hidden legacy. And now, perhaps, the first step toward healing our family, too. The night of the opening arrived with a sky full of stars and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage. I wore the blue silk dress Henry had chosen, my mother-in-law's ring, and a quiet confidence that surprised me. 6 months ago, I'd been Clara Morrison, grieving widow. Tonight, I was Clara Morrison, curator of my husband's legacy. The Morrison Gallery of Southwestern Art glowed with warm light as guests began to arrive. Art critics from New York and Los Angeles, local collectors, artists who had known Henry in his early days. Each reacted with awe as they moved through the rooms, discovering a side of Henry Morrison's work the world had never seen. "These pieces show such intimacy," a critic from the Times remarked. So different from his commercial work. What made him keep them private all these years? They were personal, I explained. Created from love, not for commerce. Henry believed some art should be lived with before it's shared. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and sharing stories about specific pieces. The gallery hummed with excitement, champagne flowed, and several paintings already displayed discreet sold markers, the proceeds destined for a scholarship fund in Henry's name. And then I saw him, Michael, standing alone by the central piece of the exhibition, a large canvas showing a woman walking along a mountain path, her back to the viewer, but her posture conveying unmistakable strength. Clara's Journey, Henry had titled it. I approached slowly, giving him time to notice me. He captured you perfectly, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Moving forward, head high, even, when the path is uncertain. He always believed I was stronger than I knew, I replied. He was right. Michael turned to face me. The gallery is incredible, Mom. Dad would be so proud of what you've created here. What we created? I corrected gently. He provided the art. I just found the right space for it. A photographer approached, asking to take our picture for the local paper. I started to decline, but Michael touched my arm. Please, he said, let's have this moment documented. For Dad. We stood together before Clara's Journey, mother and son reunited in the glow of Henry's vision. As the camera flashed, I felt a circle completing, not an ending, but a new beginning built on truth. The exhibition was declared a triumph in the art world. 3 paintings sold that night for record prices. But the true success wasn't measured in dollars or reviews. It was measured in the quiet conversation Michael and I had as the last guests departed, sitting on a bench before Henry's self-portrait. I want to make things right, my son said. I know it won't happen overnight. I know trust needs to be rebuilt, but I want to try if you'll let me. I took his hand, the same hand I'd held when he took his first steps, when he graduated high school, when he'd stood beside his father's grave. Your father once told me something I never forgot, I said. The most beautiful journeys aren't the easy ones. They're the ones that test us, that force us to find strength we didn't know we had. Outside, the New Mexico sky stretched endlessly above us, stars puncturing the darkness. Like promises, tomorrow would bring new challenges. Samantha might still fight for what she believed she deserved. The public might demand more of Henry's story than I wished to share. The path ahead wasn't clear. But tonight, in this gallery filled with beauty born from love, I understood what Henry had known all along. True wealth isn't what people see. It's what they would never expect you to carry. And I carried so much. Love, memory, forgiveness, strength. The real inheritance wasn't something that could be displayed behind glass or worn around a neck. It lived in the heart, unbreakable, undeniable, and ultimately, unstealable. The success of the gallery opening rippled through Santa Fe's art community like a stone dropped in still water. Within a week, all but 3 of Henry's paintings had sold, most for well above their appraised values. Art magazines requested interviews. Collectors called daily, hoping to commission pieces from the Morrison estate. The quiet life I'd envisioned suddenly buzzed with activity and attention. You've created quite a stir, Elaine remarked one morning as we reviewed the gallery's financial reports in my sunlit kitchen. There's talk of a retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. I poured more coffee, watching hummingbirds dart among the flowers outside my window. Henry would have been pleased. He always believed his work would find its audience eventually. And what about you, Clara? Are you pleased? The question caught me off guard. Was I? The financial success meant security. The scholarship fund for young artists was already fully endowed, and my own future was certain. But the public attention felt intrusive, especially the articles speculating about why Henry had kept his best work hidden. I'm at peace, I said finally. That's enough for now. Elaine nodded, understanding what I didn't say. Peace had come at a price. My relationship with Michael remained tentative, weekly coffee meetings where we carefully navigated the present while avoiding the still raw past. And Samantha? Speaking of peace, Elaine said, as if reading my thoughts. I received a letter from Samantha's attorney yesterday. My stomach tightened. What does she want now? That's just it. She's dropping everything. No more threats to contest the trust. No more demands for a fair share of the gallery proceeds. Elaine looked puzzled. She's agreed to a quiet divorce and is requesting only what was specifically left to her in Henry's public will. That doesn't sound like Samantha. No, it doesn't. Elaine handed me an envelope. This came with the legal notice. It's addressed to you, personally. The envelope contained a single sheet of cream stationery, Samantha's flowing script covering half the page. Clara, I'm leaving Santa Fe. The divorce will be finalized before I go. You won, though I suppose you'll say this was never a competition. Perhaps you're right. I've sold the Morrison jewels to a private collector. I assume Michael told you. The townhouse is on the market. Michael can handle the details. I won't apologize for the past. We all made choices. But I will say this. Henry saw something in you that I never understood until now. A strength that doesn't need to announce itself. A dignity that doesn't diminish others to feel important. The necklace brought me less happiness than I expected. Perhaps its new owner will fare better. Samantha. I read the letter twice, searching for hidden barbs or veiled threats, but found none. It was as close to a white flag as Samantha would ever raise. Well, I said, folding the letter. That's unexpected. Do you believe her? Elaine asked. I believe she's cutting her losses. I smiled slightly. Samantha always had good business instincts, if nothing else. Later that day, I drove to the gallery to meet with Lucia about the remaining unsold paintings. The space had been transformed since the opening, professional lighting highlighting each piece, informational placards telling the story of Henry's creative journey, a small reading room where visitors could browse catalogs and art books. We've had an interesting offer, Lucia said, leading me to her office. The Santa Fe Museum wants to create a permanent Morrison exhibit. They're proposing to take the 3 unsold pieces as a long-term loan, along with rotations of others from private collections. A permanent exhibit? I considered the idea. Henry would have been honored. There's more, Lucia continued. They want to include personal artifacts, his brushes, sketches, journals, things that tell the human story behind the art. I thought of Henry's studio at the ranch house, preserved exactly as he'd left it, his coffee mug still on the desk, his reading glasses, folded beside an open book of poetry, the half-finished canvas on the easel, waiting for a touch that would never come. I'll need to think about that, I said. Some things feel too personal to share. Lucia nodded. Of course, it's just an offer to consider. She hesitated. There's something else. A visitor came by yesterday asking specifically about you. A reporter? No. She handed me a UO business card. A former student of yours, I believe. Jessie Taylor? She said you'd changed her life. The name struck me like a physical touch. Jessie Taylor. A quiet girl with sad eyes who'd sat in the back of my senior English class 15 years ago. The girl whose essay about her mother's death had moved me to tears. The girl I'd helped apply to colleges, spending lunch hours editing her applications. Jessie, I whispered. She works for the New Yorker now? She wants to write a profile, not just about the gallery or Henry's art, but about you, your teaching career, the lives you've influenced. Lucia smiled. She was quite passionate about it, said there's a whole generation of your former students who'd like to see you recognized. I tucked the card into my purse, unexpectedly, moved. In the whirlwind of Henry's death, the will, the gallery, I'd almost forgotten the 35 years I'd spent in classrooms, working with young minds, shaping futures in ways I couldn't measure. I'll think about it, I promised, though uncertainty churned inside me. My life had been private for so long. The idea of becoming the subject of others' interest felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. As I left the gallery, my phone chimed with a text from Michael. Dinner tonight? I have news. We met at a small Spanish restaurant on the edge of town, neutral territory where we were unlikely to run into mutual acquaintances. Michael arrived first, already seated at a corner table, his face brighter than I'd seen it in months. You look well, I said, studying him as I sat down. He'd gained back some weight, and the haunted look in his eyes had diminished. I feel better, he admitted. I've been seeing a therapist, working through some things. That's good, Michael. I'm proud of you for taking that step. He smiled, a flash of the boy he'd once been. The townhouse sold yesterday, over asking price. That was quick. Santa Fe real estate, he shrugged. Everything's moving fast right now. He fiddled with his water glass. I've been thinking about what to do next. With my life, I mean. And I've applied to the Restoration Architecture program at UNM. It's competitive, but my undergraduate work in historic preservation might help. His eyes lit up as he spoke. There's so much history in this region that needs protecting. Adobe churches, historic haciendas, native structures. It's meaningful work. It sounds perfect for you, I said warmly, remembering how he'd always loved old buildings, even as a child constructing elaborate structures from blocks and cardboard. Dad would have approved, I think, Michael said quietly. He always said I had a good eye for beauty in unexpected places. He did say that, I agreed, surprised by the memory. Often. Our food arrived, paella and sangria, comfort food we'd enjoyed as a family in happier times. As we ate, Michael told me about his new apartment, his tentative steps toward independence, the books he was reading about Southwestern architecture. I shared stories about the gallery, about Lucia's curatorial vision, about the hummingbirds that visited my garden each morning. It wasn't perfect. Restoration, too much had happened for that, but it was a beginning. A fragile bridge being built one conversation at a time. I found something yesterday, Michael said as we finished our meal, when I was packing up the townhouse. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn leather book. Dad's old sketchbook, the one he carried when we took those road trips to the Grand Canyon. Remember? There are some drawings of you I thought you might want. I took the book, running my fingers over its cracked spine. I remember this. He was never without it that summer. Look at the last page, Michael urged. I turned to it and caught my breath. There, in Henry's distinctive style, was a sketch of the three of us sitting at a campfire. Michael as a lanky teenager, me with shorter hair, Henry's self-portrait with the beard he'd grown that year. Beneath it, in his careful script, the only wealth that matters. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you for finding this. Michael reached across the table, tentatively taking my hand. Mom, I've been wanting to ask, the cabin at Dry Creek Road, what are you planning to do with it? The question surprised me. I'd barely thought about the cabin since that first night, the broken-down structure that had led me to Henry's real legacy. Nothing, I suppose. Why? I'd like to restore it, he said earnestly. As my first project, I could use it as a case study for my application portfolio. And after, he hesitated. Maybe it could be a retreat, a place for young artists or writers, a Morrison family legacy of a different kind. Studied my son's face, the hope there, the desire for redemption, the architect's vision already forming behind his eyes. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said softly. Henry would have loved it. Outside the restaurant, as we prepared to part ways, Michael hugged me, the first real embrace we'd shared since before Henry's death. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up on me. I held him tight, this grown man who would always be my child. That was never an option, I told him. Never. Driving home beneath a canopy of stars, I felt something shift inside me, a door opening to a future I hadn't dared imagine. Henry had secured my financial independence, yes, but perhaps the true inheritance was this, the chance to rebuild, to create meaning from loss, to transform broken things into new beauty. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, thick cream paper with the New Yorker's distinctive logo in the corner. Inside was a letter from Jessie Taylor, the former student now working as a feature writer for the magazine. Dear Mrs. Morrison, I hope this letter finds you well. When I heard about the Morrison Gallery opening, I immediately thought of you, not just as Henry Morrison's widow, but as the teacher who changed my life 16 years ago. Do you remember telling me that stories have power? That the right words at the right time can heal wounds we didn't know could be healed? I've carried that lesson through my journalism career, always striving to find the story beneath the story. The world knows about Henry Morrison's hidden masterpieces now, but they don't know about yours, the hundreds of students whose minds you shaped, whose paths you guided, whose lives you touched with your quiet wisdom. I'd like to tell that story if you'll let me. Not just about the gallery or your husband's legacy, but about your own. The Clara Morrison who saw potential in a shy girl with messy essays and too many absences. The teacher who stayed after hours to help students apply for scholarships. The woman whose strength wasn't just revealed in adversity, but was there all along, in classrooms and faculty meetings and late-night grading sessions. Many of us have been following your story from afar. We'd like to be part of it again, if only to say thank you. With deepest respect and gratitude, Jessie Taylor. I sat on my patio, reading and rereading the letter as hummingbirds darted among the flowers. Memories surfaced. Classrooms with chalkboard dust floating in sunlight, earnest discussions about Steinbeck and Shakespeare, the particular joy of watching a student grasp a difficult concept. Jessie Taylor. I remembered her clearly now. Serious eyes, secondhand clothes, a talent for writing that had needed only encouragement to bloom. I'd written her a college recommendation, helped her apply for scholarships. But I'd done the same for dozens of students over the years, that she remembered so vividly, that she credited me with changing her life. I reached for my phone and dialed the number on the card Lucia had given me. "Mrs. Morrison?" Jessie answered on the second ring, her voice warm with surprise. "I can't believe you called. Clara, please." I said, "I think after all this time we can dispense with formalities." "Clara," she said, the words sounding strange to both of us. "Did you receive my letter?" "Just this morning. It was unexpected, but not unwelcome, I hope." I gazed out at the mountains, considering. I've been a private person most of my life, Jessie. Teaching was my public role, but the rest, my marriage, my personal life, that was always separate. "I understand," she said quickly, "and I'd respect those boundaries. This wouldn't be an invasive profile, more of a tribute, really." "A tribute," I repeated. "To what, exactly?" "To impact," Jessie said simply. "The kind that ripples outward in ways we can't always see. When I posted about your gallery opening on social media, dozens of your former students responded, doctors, lawyers, teachers, artists, all sharing stories about how you influenced them. I felt a flush of warmth at the thought. I was just doing my job. With respect, Mrs. Clara, you did far more than that." Her voice grew earnest. "You saw potential in students that other teachers dismissed. You pushed us to think critically, to find our own voices, and you did it all while supporting your husband's career and raising your son. It wasn't always graceful," I admitted, thinking of the late nights grading papers while Henry painted in his studio, the parent-teacher conferences I'd rushed to after gallery openings, the constant juggling act of woman, wife, mother, teacher. "That's what makes it remarkable," Jessie insisted. "You never made it look easy because it wasn't easy. But you showed us, especially your female students, that it was possible to have a meaningful career and a rich personal life, to be a whole person." I sipped my tea, letting her words sink in. Henry's legacy was secure now, his art recognized, his vision celebrated. But my own work had been quieter, less tangible. Thousands of essays graded, hundreds of minds shaped, countless. Conversations that might have changed a direction, offered an insight, opened a door. "What would this involve?" I asked finally. "A series of interviews, at your home, at the gallery, perhaps at your old school if you're comfortable. I'd also speak with some of your former students and colleagues, with your approval, of course." "And the angle? What's your story really about, Jessie?" She paused, considering. "It's about second acts, about how a woman who spent decades nurturing others' potential is now stepping into her own spotlight. It's about what real legacy looks like." I thought about Henry's letter in the cabin that night. True wealth isn't what people see. It's what they would never expect you to carry. Perhaps this was part of what he meant, the invisible riches of lives. Touched, minds opened, paths altered in ways I might never fully know. "All right," I said. "I'll do it. But on one condition." "Anything," Jessie said eagerly. "I want to hold a reunion, for former students, colleagues, anyone who was part of that chapter of my life, at the gallery." The idea formed as I spoke it, feeling right. If we're going to talk about impact, let's create a full circle. Moment. "That's perfect," Jessie breathed. "Absolutely perfect." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jessie interviewed me for hours about my childhood in Arizona, my college years studying literature, my early marriage to Henry when we were both idealistic and broke. We talked about teaching philosophies and parenting challenges, about balancing ambition with contentment, about finding purpose in quiet moments. Meanwhile, invitations went out for what we called an evening of reconnection at the Morrison Gallery. Through social media, alumni networks, and local news, the word spread. RSVPs poured in, former students now in their 30s and 40s, retired teachers who'd been my mentors, colleagues I hadn't seen in years. "This is becoming quite the event," Lucia remarked as we transformed the gallery for the evening, arranging chairs in a semicircle, setting up a small podium, preparing a slideshow of yearbook photos and classroom snapshots I'd found in old albums. "It wasn't my intention," I admitted, "but it feels important somehow, a way of honoring that part of my life." Michael arrived early, helping move furniture and hang a banner he'd designed, celebrating Clara Morrison, teacher, mentor, inspiration. Seeing it, I felt a flutter of embarrassment. "Isn't that a bit much?" I asked him. He studied me with a smile. "Mom, for once in your life, let yourself be celebrated. You've earned it." As twilight fell, they began to arrive, faces both familiar and transformed by time. Former students now with gray in their hair, colleagues stooped with age, young adults who introduced themselves as, "You taught my mother, Mrs. Morrison." Jessie had organized a program, brief speeches, shared memories, a video compilation of testimonials from those who couldn't attend. I sat in the front row, alternately laughing and wiping away tears as former students recounted moments I'd long forgotten. A particularly challenging assignment that had sparked a career path, a private conversation that had offered comfort during a difficult time, a book recommendation that had opened new worlds. Dr. James Wilson, now chief of surgery at the University Hospital, recalled how I'd arranged for him to attend a medical conference when he was a sophomore with dreams of becoming a doctor, but no family support. Mrs. Morrison not only drove me there herself, he told the crowd. She sat through every presentation, taking notes because she knew I was too nervous to focus. 25 years and thousands of surgeries later, I still have those notes. Maria Gonzalez, who'd gone on to become the state's youngest district judge, described how I'd defended her when another teacher had accused her of plagiarism on an essay. Mrs. Morrison said, "I know my student's voice, and this is hers." That moment taught me more about justice and trust than any law book ever could. As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by the living embodiment of my life's work. Doctors, teachers, artists, engineers, parents, all carrying forward something I had given them, often without realizing its significance at the time. When it was my turn to speak, I stood at the podium, looking out at these faces that represented decades of my life, and felt momentarily overwhelmed. Teaching, I began softly, is an act of faith. Faith that what we offer will take root. Faith that knowledge shared becomes wisdom earned. Faith that the books we discuss, the questions we pose, the challenges we present will matter in lives we can't fully imagine. I gestured to the paintings surrounding us, Henry's work, his legacy made visible. My husband created beauty that will outlast all of us. But tonight, I see that I too created something lasting, not in canvas and paint, but in the intangible spaces where minds and hearts meet. In the countless moments where a word of encouragement or challenge might have changed a direction, opened a door, illuminated a path. Looking at Michael in the front row, at Jessie taking notes nearby, at the room full of lives connected to mine in ways I couldn't have predicted, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't known I was seeking. Henry once told me that true wealth isn't what people see. It's what they would never expect you to carry. I touched my heart. Tonight, I am the richest woman in New Mexico, carrying the wealth of your stories, your successes, your kind memories. Thank you for this gift. The applause washed over me like a blessing. As people lined up to speak with me individually, to share more memories or introduce family members, I caught sight of Jessie across the room, watching with a journalist's observant eye and a former student's pride. This, too, was inheritance, the legacy of a life, spent nurturing potential, fostering growth, believing in possibilities. Not carved in stone or framed on walls, but alive in the world, moving forward in ways I would never fully know. Summer faded into autumn, painting the Santa Fe landscape in golds and crimsons. The Morrison Gallery had become a fixture in the city's art scene, drawing visitors from across the country. Michael's restoration of the Dry Creek cabin was progressing steadily, its transformation from abandoned shack to artisan retreat, documented in a photo series that had caught the attention of architectural magazines. And I, Clara Morrison, widow, teacher, curator of memories, found myself in an unexpected new chapter. Jessie's article in The New Yorker, titled "The Teacher's Legacy," had struck a chord far beyond what either of us anticipated. The piece wove together my teaching career, Henry's secret art collection, and the complex family dynamics that had followed his death into a narrative about resilience, second acts, and the different forms legacy can take. Within days of publication, my inbox filled with messages from former students I'd lost track of, from educators inspired by my story, from women who recognized themselves in my journey. "You've become something of a reluctant celebrity," Elaine observed one crisp October morning as we walked through the gallery, where a new exhibition of Henry's early works had just opened. "I've had 3 interview requests for you this week alone." I shook my head, still uncomfortable with the attention. I'm hardly a celebrity, just an old teacher who married an artist who turned out to be more valuable than anyone realized. That's not how the world sees it, Elaine countered. Your story resonates, Clara. The dignified way you handled betrayal, the unexpected inheritance, the reunion with your students. People are hungry for stories about women finding strength in later life. We paused before a small painting I'd always loved, Henry's. Rendering of our first apartment's tiny kitchen, where I'd graded papers at the table while he sketched by the window. The intimacy of the scene, the careful attention to mundane details, revealed the quiet love that had sustained us through lean years. I have something to tell you, Elaine said, her tone shifting. Philip Green contacted me yesterday. My heart quickened. Philip Green, Henry's original lawyer, the one who had handled the public will, who had sat stone-faced as I received nothing but the cabin key. What did he want? He's retiring, closing his practice. Elaine hesitated. He asked to meet with you, said there's something you should know. After all this time? I frowned. Why now? He wouldn't say. Just that it concerns Henry's final arrangements. 2 days later, I sat across from Philip Green in his downtown office, a space being dismantled around us, boxes stacked against walls, empty shelves where law books had once stood. The man himself looked smaller than I remembered, his former imposing presence diminished by age and perhaps the weight of secrets. Mrs. Morrison, he began, hands folded on his desk. Thank you for coming. I know our last meeting was difficult. That's one word for it, I replied coolly. What's this about, Mr. Green? He sighed, reaching for a folder. Henry came to see me 3 weeks before he died. He was very weak by then, but absolutely clear about what he wanted. He slid a document across the desk. This is a letter he asked me to give you 1 year after his death. I stared at the envelope. A year? It's been nearly 2. Green looked away, shame coloring his features. Yes, I delayed, out of loyalty to Michael, who had become a client in his own right, out of concern for how this might affect the family dynamics. It was unprofessional of me, unethical even. What changed? I asked, not touching the envelope. Your New Yorker profile? He admitted. Reading about your teaching career, about the lives you influenced. It made me realize I'd misjudged you, made assumptions based on limited information. He gestured to the envelope. You deserve to know everything. Henry wanted you to know everything. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, covered in Henry's handwriting, shakier than his usual script, but unmistakably his. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, a year has passed since I left you. I hope you found the cabin by now and all that it contained. I hope you understand why I created 2 paths for our legacy. But there's one thing I couldn't explain in those other letters. One truth I held back. Michael knows everything. Our son came to me 3 months before my diagnosis with a confession. Samantha had been systematically taking money from our accounts, small amounts at first, then larger sums. She'd convinced him it was for investment opportunities, for their future. By the time he realized the extent of her deception, they were in too deep. The money was gone, spent on her lifestyle, her ambitions. Michael was ashamed, afraid to tell you, afraid to admit he'd been fooled, manipulated by the woman he'd chosen over. Our objections. We made a plan together. He would stay with her, maintain the facade, while secretly helping me protect what remained of our estate. The public will was his idea. Let Samantha think she's won, he said. Let her have the jewels, the townhouse, things that can be sold or lost, while we protect what really matters. He helped me establish the trust. He suggested the cabin as the perfect hiding place, a property Samantha had always disdained, would never bother to visit. He even drove me to Santa Fe when you were at the school conference to make the final arrangements with Elaine. I couldn't tell you then. The plan required Samantha to believe she had succeeded, required her to see Michael as her ally, not mine. And you, my love, have never been able to hide your true feelings. Your honest heart would have revealed everything. Forgive Michael for the deception. Forgive me for keeping this from you. We did what we thought necessary to protect you, to preserve what we'd built together. By now, I hope Michael has found his way back to you. I hope he's become the man we raised him to be, one who learns from mistakes, who chooses integrity over convenience, who values truth above comfort. Know that I left this world at peace, certain that the 2 people I loved most would find their way back to each other, stronger for having been tested. With eternal love, Henry. The letter blurred before my eyes. I read it twice, 3 times, trying to absorb its implications. Michael had known, had helped plan the entire deception, had stood by while I believed myself, betrayed, abandoned, forgotten in Henry's final arrangements. "Did Michael know about this letter?" I asked, my voice hardly above a whisper. Green shook his head. "No. Henry was explicit that neither of you should know about the other's role until a year had passed. He believed you both needed time, you to discover your own strength, Michael, to find his way out from under Samantha's influence." I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. "Thank you for finally sharing this, Mr. Green. Will you tell him," he asked, "that you know?" I considered the question, remembering the progress we'd made over recent months. Tentative steps toward reconciliation, shared projects, careful conversations rebuilding trust. Would this revelation strengthen our healing bond or fracture it again? "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. That evening, I sat on my patio, watching the sunset paint the mountains in fire, Henry's letter resting in my lap. The revelation of Michael's role changed everything. And nothing. My son had made terrible mistakes, yes, had been complicit in a deception that caused me pain. But he had also tried in his way to protect me, to honor his father's wishes, to make amends. My phone chimed with a text message. "Cabin update. Roof is finally finished. Want to come see tomorrow? Michael." I gazed at the message, seeing beyond the simple words to the man behind them. My child, Henry's son, imperfect and human, and trying to rebuild what had been broken. The cabin that had once symbolized my abandonment now represented something else. Redemption. Renewal. The possibility of second chances. "I'll be there at 10, I replied. "And Michael, I have something important to share with you." The night wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, stars puncturing the darkness above. Whatever tomorrow brought, difficult conversations, painful truths, new understandings, I would face it with the strength Henry had always seen in me. The strength I had, finally recognized in myself. Some inheritances aren't found in wills or trusts or hidden compartments. They live in the resilience we discover when tested, in the forgiveness we offer when wounded, in the wisdom that comes only through loss and recovery. These, too, were Henry's gifts to me, perhaps the most valuable of all. The Dry Creek cabin stood transformed in the morning light, its weathered exterior restored to honey-colored wood, its broken windows replaced with energy-efficient panes that reflected the blue New Mexico sky. The sagging porch had been rebuilt, now wrapping around 2 sides of the structure to create a welcoming outdoor space with views of the mountains. Michael greeted me with a carpenter's pencil behind his ear and sawdust on his jeans, a far cry from the polished, ambitious man who had stood beside Samantha at that painful party so many months ago. "What do you think?" he asked eagerly, gesturing to the cabin. "We've still got interior work to finish, but the structural renovation is complete." "It's beautiful," I said sincerely, taking in the careful craftsmanship, the attention to original details, the thoughtful improvements that honored the building's history while making it viable for the future. "You've done something remarkable here." "I had good material to work with," he said. Underneath all the neglect, the bones were solid. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. He led me inside, where the transformation was even more dramatic. Gone was the musty, abandoned interior I'd encountered that first night. Sunlight streamed through new windows onto polished wood floors. The space had been opened up, revealing hand-hewn ceiling beams and a central fireplace built from local stone. The hidden compartment in the wall, where I'd found Henry's letters and documents, had been preserved and incorporated into a custom bookshelf. "I wanted to keep it," Michael explained, touching the small drawer, "as a reminder of what was hidden here, of what it revealed." I ran my fingers along the edge, remembering that moment of discovery, the shock, the confusion, the gradual understanding that had changed everything. "It's a good reminder," I agreed. We settled on the front porch with cups of coffee, looking out over the land that had once seemed so desolate to me, but now revealed its own stark beauty, the sculptural shapes of cacti, the distant, purple mountains, the endless sky that made human concerns seem small and temporary. "You said you had something to share," Michael prompted after a comfortable silence. I pulled Henry's letter from my purse. "Philip Green gave me this. Your father wrote it before he died, meant for me to receive a year after his passing." Michael's expression grew guarded. "What does it say?" "Read it yourself," I said gently, handing him the envelope. He took it with hesitation, unfolding the letter and beginning to read. I watched his face change. Surprise, then dismay, then a complicated mixture of relief and apprehension. "Mom," he began when he finished, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "You could start with the truth," I suggested. "All of it this time." He nodded, setting the letter aside and meeting my eyes directly. "Samantha and I were in trouble. Financially, I mean. Before Dad got sick. She had expensive tastes. I wanted to give her everything, to prove I could be successful in my own right, not just Henry Morrison's son." He sighed. "I made bad investments, took risks I shouldn't have, and when they didn't pay off, Samantha suggested we borrow from Dad's accounts. Just temporarily," she said. "But it wasn't temporary," I said. "No, and it wasn't small amounts either, eventually. When Dad confronted me, God, I was so ashamed. I expected him to disown me on the spot." Michael's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Instead, he listened. Really listened. Then he said, "We need to protect your mother, and we need to help you find your way back. So you created the plan together." "Yes. The public will giving everything to Samantha and me. The hidden trust for you. The cabin as the key to it all." He ran a hand through his hair. "I had to play my part convincingly. Samantha couldn't suspect anything. But it was horrible, Mom. Watching you at the will reading, at that party, knowing how hurt you were. Why didn't you tell me after?" "Once. I'd found everything? Once Samantha was out of the picture?" "Shame," he said simply. "How could I admit I'd been part of causing you such pain? That I'd helped steal from my own parents? That I'd been so easily manipulated?" He gestured helplessly. "And then, as time passed, it seemed harder to tell you. We were rebuilding something. I was afraid of losing that." I considered his words, turning them over carefully. The anger I might have expected to feel was strangely absent. In its place was something more complicated, a mixture of relief at finally understanding the full story, sadness for what we'd all lost in the deception, and compassion for my son's impossible position. "What happens now?" Michael asked, the same question he'd posed in Elaine's office months earlier. I looked out at the desert landscape, harsh and beautiful in its honesty. "Now we move forward with the truth, all of it. No more secrets." "Just like that?" His voice held disbelief. "You're not angry?" "I was angry for a long time, Michael. At your father for what I thought was betrayal. At you for standing with Samantha. At myself for not seeing what was happening under my own roof." I turned to face him. Fully. "But anger is exhausting, and ultimately unproductive. Dad always said you were the strongest person he knew," Michael said quietly. "I never fully understood what he meant until this past year. Watching you rebuild your life, create the gallery, connect with your former students. Strength isn't about never falling," I told him. "It's about how you rise afterward." We sat in companionable silence, finishing our coffee as the morning sun climbed higher, warming the porch. "The artist retreat is nearly ready," Michael said eventually. "The first residents could move in next month if we push." "Is that what you want? To finish this project and move on?" He considered the question. "Actually, I've been thinking about making this a more permanent endeavor. The Morrison Artists' Sanctuary." He gestured to the surrounding land. "We could build additional cabins over time, create a real community for creators who need space and support." "That sounds like a worthwhile legacy," I said. "Would you be part of it?" he asked hesitantly. "As an advisor, maybe? You have connections in the art world now, through the gallery, and your perspective as an educator would be valuable." I smiled, seeing the future taking shape before us. Not a perfect restoration of what was lost, but something new, built from the strongest parts of the past. "I'd be honored," I told him. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the newly expanded Morrison Gallery, addressing the crowd gathered for a special exhibition, Henry Morrison, The Complete Legacy. The show united his public and private works for the first time, accompanied by the story of our family, the truths, the deceptions, the reconciliations, presented with honesty and grace. Michael stood nearby, now the director of the thriving Morrison Artists' Sanctuary, which had already hosted dozens of creators from across the country. Jesse Taylor sat in the front row, preparing to interview me for a follow-up piece on how our story had evolved. Around the room, former students mingled with art patrons, gallery curators, and the first generation of sanctuary artists. 3 years ago, I began, I stood in a broken-down cabin, feeling betrayed and forgotten. Today, I stand before you surrounded by the many forms of legacy my husband left behind. His art, yes, but also the institutions we've built together, the relationships we've healed, the community we've created. I gestured to the paintings around us, to Michael, to the gathered crowd. Henry once told me that true wealth isn't what people see. It's what they would never expect you to carry. I've come to understand what he meant. The most valuable inheritance isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It's measured in resilience, in forgiveness, in the capacity to begin again. My gaze found Michael's across the room, and I saw in his eyes the reflection of his father, the creativity, the depth, the complexity that had drawn me to Henry all those years ago. The Morrison family story isn't about jewels or cabins or hidden treasures, I continued. It's about the courage to face truth, the strength to rebuild what's broken, the wisdom to recognize that our greatest legacy isn't what we leave behind, but how we live each day we're given. After the speeches, as guests moved through the exhibition, I slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The Santa Fe evening wrapped around me like a familiar embrace, stars emerging in the darkening sky. I touched my mother-in-law's ring, still on my finger after all this time. "We did it, Henry," I whispered to the night. "We preserved what matters." The door opened behind me, and Michael stepped out. "Everything okay, Mom?" "Just taking a moment," I said, smiling at him. "It's been quite a journey." He nodded, looking out at the city lights below us. "Dad would be proud of all of it." "Yes," I agreed. "I think he would." We stood together in comfortable silence, mother and son, each, carrying our portion of Henry's legacy, not just his name or his art or his wealth, but his vision for what we could become. Some inheritances can be stolen, sold, or lost. Others remain untouchable, carried in the heart, shaped by experience, strengthened through adversity. These are the true treasures, the love that endures beyond betrayal, the truth that emerges from deception, the beauty that rises from broken places. As we turned to rejoin the gathering inside, I felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a circle connecting past to present to future. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I would face them with the confidence of a woman who had discovered her own strength, reclaimed her own story, and created her own legacy. This, too, was inheritance, the most valuable kind of all.